Awesome. Devon, thank you so much for being with us today. Before we dive into a lot of the questions that I have for you, I would love to hear more about your backstory, kind of both what you're doing right now in terms of how you're serving people, how you're helping your clients. Then also, I'd imagine you've been into fitness for a very long time. So kind of the backstory that led you to how you're helping people now.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So backstory. I guess I always had an interest in health. Like I loved health class in school. But it wasn't till high school, like I guess my junior or senior year, where I just wanted to like feel better and I wanted to like lose weight. Um, and I just like when I started it, like I started going to the gym, I started eating healthier, and it just became like my thing, if that makes sense. Like it was like I just like loved it. I mean, I guess it was like a love-hate relationship. Like obviously like change is hard, and like getting yourself to start exercising is hard, but at the same time it just became like my thing. And then throughout college, I just stuck with it. Like I started running. Running became like my main mode of exercise. I was lifting weights here and there, but I was definitely more focused on running at that time. And eating, I think I maybe took, I don't want to say a quick fix approach, but I think I thought lower calories was better. To more of the extreme, where I didn't realize how that would affect me in more long term, with health. So I guess initially took a more like extreme approach, like cutting out a lot of foods and like just ultra low calorie, running a lot, doing a little bit of strength training, and then just gradually, I guess long story short, like gradually realized that that was not sustainable. And then in school, I majored in exercise science. Originally wanted to do nutrition, but they didn't have nutrition at my school, and I was going to transfer. And then nutrition also had a lot of chemistry, and I was like, I don't really want to do chemistry. And it seemed like I also didn't want to just be like sitting in an office writing people diet plans and just like, oh, here you go, cookie cutter diet plan, bye. So I figured exercise science was more broad. So I did exercise science and had no idea what I wanted to do. And then my senior year, when I was going to do my internship, this girl that I was in one of my classes, she was like, oh, I did this. I shadowed personal trainers for my internship, and it was really cool. And so she gave me the information for the gym. So that's what I ended up doing. So that is where, I mean, I loved it. Like I asked or there was a few personal trainers that I really liked shadowing, because you could tell they really cared about what they did and they knew what they were talking about. And I just asked questions like every session that I shadowed, I was just asking questions the whole time. So I just really absorbed as much information as possible. And it helped me actually with my own training, because that's really when I got into strength training. And I was still doing running, but I just really shifted my focus to building muscle and getting stronger. And I was just more into like, I would look at like bodybuilding.com and like just different bodybuilders. And I just focused my training more on building muscle. And that's like when I officially got into lifting. So that was my internship. I learned a lot. And then I was like, you know what, I'll just get my personal training certification when I graduate till I figure out what I want to do. And so that's what I did. Got a job at a gym, and the rest was history. And now I'm still doing it. And that's like 7 years later.
Wow.
So, yeah.
That's fantastic. So I want to dive a little bit deeper into one thing you had mentioned about early on. It was a little more the cardio route, a little more like super low calories. And you said you noticed it wasn't super sustainable. Was it that you didn't feel great when you were doing that? Was it you weren't getting the results you want? Like, how do you feel like you eventually made that transition to like, I see your work now, tons of strength training, like getting leaner, getting stronger, tons of nutrient dense foods. Like, what do you feel like helped you make that transition?
Well, I think it was a lot of things. I think just, I guess, coming to the realization that, I guess looking back, like you can only get so far when you don't have a lot of muscle mass. You can only change your body so much. Like you can't, like when it comes to cutting calories, you can only cut so low before you don't have enough to even like be enough to like survive. Like, yeah. So I just like I just was at the point where I wasn't healthy. So I like stopped getting my period and, for a couple of years. So when that isn't happening, it's just a sign that like something's not right. So, I think my shift once I realized that I needed to just focus on getting healthier and just stop being so restrictive. I think that's yeah, my focus shifted more on I just wanted to be like normal, because like you get to a point where you're living so extremely differently. Like yeah, we have to live differently than the average person to get different results than them, but it's just at that point I was just living very differently from the average, and I was in college. So at that point I just wanted to be like normal, so that like my quest became just being able to like do social things and be normal and like have health and fitness fit into that, instead of having health and fitness be everything and then like having it flipped around, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it definitely does. And I think it's amazing how often when we focus on the health benefits, whether it's physical health or mental health for you, like say not having food anxiety and like not feeling like the end of the world if you miss a run, how often the like aesthetic results come on the back end of it. Whereas if we double down on the aesthetic side of things, it's almost like the health can suffer a little bit when that's an afterthought.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
So client comes into you now at the gym. They want to look better. They want to feel better. Obviously, you're going to gravitate them a little more towards strength training. Can you dive a
Mm-hmm.
little deeper into why that is probably the best route for most people, the body composition goal, why you would prioritize strength training over a little bit of cardio, kind of how you'd set that up?
Yeah. So I think a lot of the times, especially with it's for men and women, but most people think that they have muscle already and all they need to do is do the cardio to lose the fat to expose the muscle. But I think if most people dieted down and lost a significant amount of body fat, they would realize how little muscle mass they had. So I think with that real like with that awareness, I think people would be definitely more open to trying strength training initially. Um, but so that's why I would emphasize. So if someone specifically um, wants to improve body composition, the first thing, like strength is like the foundation. Like muscle is really what's going to make the biggest difference in body composition. And like this is something you've talked about a lot. Like workouts should be to preserve muscle. If your goals are body composition, they either preserve or build muscle. Um, so I think like getting away from the fact that like sweating and being sore and doing a ton of cardio is a productive way to work out. We really need to shift the focus to increasing the amount of muscle that we have in order to basically, I think Brett Contreras said this once. It's like you build a bigger engine. So it's not just, so it's like you're burning more calories at rest. Muscle is really what's going to shape up the body. You can eat more calories at a higher body weight, but look better. So better body composition, but weigh more and be able to eat more. So more sustainable. So the more sustainable it is, the longer you're able to do it. The longer you do it, the more progress you make. So I think that's it basically like muscle, like coming to the conclusion that muscle is the foundation of body composition, and then focusing the workouts around that, which is like you were saying, strength
Yeah, for sure. Now, for somebody who's
training.
ready and comfortable to try this, you're like, okay, I want to gravitate a little bit away from the cardio, like I'm willing to try some strength training. Obviously, you and I both see a lot of obstacles, whether it's gym intimidation, whether it's fear of getting bulky. So, if you have a client who's like willing to try it but a little nervous, is there anything in particular you'd recommend for somebody who's trying to get more comfortable in a gym setting, more comfortable pursuing strength as a goal? Like, how would you approach that?
So do you want to answer this the gym intimidation
Yeah,
first, or
yeah, we can break that one down. Yeah,
the, there's the gym intimidation and then there's the bulky part. So I guess I'll go with the gym intimidation first. And I think even for me, like I experienced gym intimidation up until probably a couple years ago. Um, I think even now, like when I go on vacation and I work out at a new gym, sometimes I'm like a little bit self-conscious. So I think knowing that there's always going to be some level of being self-conscious, but it's like with anything, the more you do it, the easier it becomes. So it's almost like you just have to like put your blinders on and just focus on your workout. And like at the end of the day, like your progress, like you want to hold your progress at a higher level over being uncomfortable with like feeling self-conscious in the gym. But I think the more you do it, the more confident you're going to feel in like, you know what you're doing. Like people aren't looking at you like, what is this person doing? Um, it's more of, it just takes time. So it's just something that a lot of people experience and it's totally understandable. And it's just like being patient with yourself and just making yourself do it over and over again until it's not that uncomfortable anymore.
sure. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the time component because, like we were talking about before we started filming this, like I've had friends, I mean, have friends, I should say, in the industry who, when they've like come to do a workout with me, like when I was living in Miami, we were out on the beach. These are people who've been in the industry as long as we have, right? 5, 10, 15 years, and they're still like a little nervous, and there's a lot of other fit people around. But to your point, one, everybody kind of feels that way to some degree, right? If trainers and coaches feel that way, you can imagine the average gym goer is also very nervous to the point where we're not really paying attention to what other people are doing. You know what I mean? Like we're not really looking around. So I'm glad you mentioned the time component and that nobody's immune to it. Like we all feel like this to some degree. So yeah, I think that makes a big difference. Now, on the other side of it, somebody's willing to try this. They're kind of getting past the gym intimidation, but they've always heard that strength training makes you bulky. How would you coach somebody through that? How would you get them more comfortable going heavier and like thinking of muscle building is a good thing?
Yeah. So that's definitely a question that I get a lot from females that I initially meet with. And usually, and then I'll go into like, women don't have the hormones to build that much muscle. Like if you ask anyone who's truly intentionally trying to build muscle, especially women, they will tell you how hard it actually is. Um, it takes being very meticulous with your training and eating to build the muscle. So it doesn't happen by accident. And then going into like having them monitor their progress with progress pictures and measurements and making sure that they're doing that to make sure they're making the progress they want. But at the same time, they can use those pictures and measurements to see like if they got to the point where they thought they had too much muscle mass, that they could always adjust their training to just stop building muscle. But yeah, and most people won't, like most women especially, won't get to that point where they built too much muscle mass. Um, yeah, I mean, and I've had some women build muscle in certain areas. And what I've told them, like sometimes like quads or like upper traps, and we've just had to adjust the exercises. So it's basically like, don't do progressive overload in exercises that build those specific areas. Because it is, even though it's almost impossible to get bulky or build too much muscle, like if someone is self-conscious about building muscle, like you can always, just knowing you can always scale back, and that like I understand their concern and we can always adjust if they got to a point where any certain muscle they thought was like too big for their liking. But yeah, that's where I would start with like the whole bulky thing.
Yeah, sure. So both understanding the science of it, knowing that physiologically the odds are not in your favor when it comes to muscle building, but then also having the facts to back that up. Or even if you're still a little hesitant, it's like, okay, I've been, getting my deadlift from 135 to 185, and I'm afraid I'm bulking out. But if you have photos and measurements and weigh-ins, you're like, oh, I don't look like the Hulk. I actually look a little bit leaner now. Like, so having those to go off.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And like you were saying about deadlifting, a lot of times with, especially with women with squats and deadlifts, they're going to be limited by the weight that they can hold on their shoulders or in their hands, to the point where they would do a much better job at um, like doing better things for their metabolism, rather than getting to the point where they're lifting too much, where they're going to build too much muscle, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. Yeah, that's fantastic. So I want to quickly run through and recap this kind of first topic we're talking about, which is making the transition to strength training. So first thing we talked about in terms of why it's superior for body composition, it's like you said, muscle, and like building and developing the muscle is the engine for everything else we do, right? Like quality of life, just moving better, being able to be more flexible with calories, being more confident and kind of lean the way you look. They moved on to, on the mental side of things, getting over the fear of gym intimidation, which a lot of it comes down to knowing that everybody else is probably equally as scared as we are. That's okay. And I really like the point you made about valuing progress over some level of intimidation. It's like, what do I value more? Like feeling more comfortable by not pushing myself, or that progress I'll eventually get. And then we wrap things up with the how to avoid getting bulky, which is knowing that just physiologically it's not going to happen, but also have the facts to back that up to let you know, hey, this isn't happening. It's okay to get strong.
Right, right.
Is there anything else that you'd add to that? Do you feel like we covered that topic pretty well?
Um, no, I think I think we covered pretty much everything
Yeah,
that we
fantastic.
contribute to that.
So let's talk about the nutritional side of things, like how to actually support these goals. Because obviously, no matter how hard we go in the gym, nutrition is going to dictate how much, or I should say, what kind of results we are getting from the workouts. So
Right.
I've seen you post so much good stuff on kind of making your nutrition run on autopilot, how to not, like you mentioned earlier, make it your entire life where you're skipping social events to, prep grilled chicken. So what are some of the ways that, I should say, what are some of the things you do while grocery shopping, while getting ready for your week, that lend themselves to nutrition becoming a lot easier?
I think I think like one, having the non-negotiable of a grocery, um, a weekly grocery trip, and at least 1 to 2 hours of cooking in bulk every single week, like built into the schedule, where you know that where nothing's going to get in the way, where like other events aren't going to come up. So a day in the week, it doesn't have to be, a lot of people's like meal prep Sunday, but it doesn't, if Sunday is when you want to have Sunday fun day and go out with your friends, like it doesn't make sense to expect yourself to prepare meals on that day. But I think the foundation is the non-negotiable of grocery shopping and meal prepping. Because I think through working with a lot of clients, I've learned that I try to help them with their nutrition, and then I find that they don't even get to the grocery store every week. Like sometimes either maybe their husband does it, and doesn't have any idea of like what to get that they need to eat to improve body composition, or they eat out a lot of meals. But yeah, so it's just something that I realized was that it's like, no matter, I can give all the advice in the world, but if the foundation isn't there of having the food there to cook, and to cook it so it's conveniently ready to heat up, like it's going to be really difficult to put the nutrition on autopilot. So that being the foundation of that is just that non-negotiable of getting there every single week. And again, the cooking, and then after that, everything becomes a lot easier.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you mentioned making it like a non-negotiable part of the calendar, because I see this all the time, like with my clients, where it's like, oh, I need to get to the grocery store. I need to get to the grocery store. But if there are 2 or 3 days every single week that you're like trying to get to the grocery store, those 2 or 3 days of nutrition are probably going to be pretty poor, because you're going to get a lot of stuff on the go. Even a healthy option, as you know, doesn't necessarily make it fat loss friendly. You almost lose 2 or 3 days every single week. Like you said, you can have all the strategies in the world for like how to prep well and how to stay full, but if you don't actually have the food there with you, like it doesn't matter how many healthy snacks you know if you don't have the snacks with you. Now, when you are actually going to the store, I've seen you post a lot of stuff that's not overly challenging to make. Like it's not these 30 ingredient recipes that a lot of people shoot right to. So what are some of the strategies that you use to make your meal prep as simple as possible?
I think when I really don't want to put the energy into cooking, I I'll get, like you said, already prepared stuff like the rotisserie chicken, like tuna in a can that's easy open, or like the flavored packets, like things that there's no excuse for me not to get the protein in, because it's there and it's easy to prepare. Like steam in a bag vegetables, like the hard boiled eggs that are like already cooked. So I have those go-tos for times that I really don't feel like cooking. But then on the other hand, um, like I have other like sheet pan meals, crock pot meals. I have like a few very basic recipes, like a taco bowl. Like all you do is brown the meat, cut up the vegetables, season it, and you're good to go. So most of my meals are just very simple, and I think the simpler that I keep it, um, but making sure it's still something I enjoy eating, the easier it becomes. And it's like the longer I've been doing it, longer I've been cooking for myself, it's like the more simpler, like the more simple
Sure.
and the less elaborate meals are. And I can still, it's been a learning process, but I can still find ways to make that enjoyable for me. But
I'm,
yes, simpler is always almost always better.
yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that in terms of the longer you've done it, you didn't go more complex, you went more simple. Because I'm sure you've seen a lot of people try to jump straight from eating out, 10, 15 times a week to these 30 ingredient Pinterest recipes, these like power bite omelet, egg white, and you're just like, no, just make scrambled eggs first, like nail
Right.
that, and then kind of add a layer to it over time. And the other thing I'm really glad you mentioned was kind of practicing and tinkering over time. So, for example, like a new client may start with me, and we have them like grilled chicken, the classic example for the first time. Like that was horrible. I'm like, all right, maybe let's try it in a crock pot. Maybe let's try it in a pan. Maybe let's try different seasoning. You don't just quit right away when like it wouldn't make
Right.
sense to be good at meal prep you haven't done it consistently, like figuring out ways to keep things fresh. Like you said, tinker, maybe that taco bowl. Maybe you used to try different vegetables that you didn't like, and now you try
Yeah.
some that you like. So I feel like it is so important to know that, like, it's a skill in itself. You're not supposed to be good at it until you've done it consistently.
Totally. Yeah, and that's something that there've been plenty of times that I've cooked an entire recipe and it was gross and I had to throw the whole thing out because it was just so bad. So there's going to be that there's a lot of trial and error, and I think in the first few years that I was cooking a lot, there was a lot more of that, and I think now there's a lot less of that, but it just takes time. Like you said, it's a skill. So there's always going to be the things that you cook that end up gross, and you get better at it as you go.
Sure, no, that makes sense. And one of the things that I've said you posted about before, I've actually quoted you on in the group is that not every meal needs to be like this A plus celebratory meal. Like sometimes it just needs to get the job done.
Mhm.
So if the chicken that you made is 3 days old and you microwave it and you're like, this is pretty average, like not that great, that's okay. Because not every meal needs to be like this incredible world class experience. Sometimes it's just serving the purpose of keeping you full, making you feel better after because it's healthy and you move on from there. Maybe on a weekend day, you go a little bit more all out with the meal and prepping and try to get it to that A plus.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. Cause it's like knowing that there's like a time and place for everything. Like when I'm at work during the day, like breakfast and lunch, or like pre-workout and post-workout, like those meals are just going to be very, like pretty basic. And then when I have more time to think about it, maybe dinner, or like you said, maybe like a weekend meal, or if I decide to go out, like that might be somewhere where the meal is maybe a little bit more elaborate, but it really just depends on like what I feel like. Like it's not like I'm ever like locked into like, all right, you have to eat this plain chicken, broccoli, and rice every single day. Like that would just get really boring too. Um, so just knowing that I have the freedom to eat meals that are satisfying, but also, like you said, get the job done.
Sure, yeah. to kind of round up before we move on our last topic today, the making good nutrition run on autopilot, non-negotiable grocery trip every single week. So you actually have the foods to implement the strategies with.
Right.
1 or 2 meal prep sessions a week. You said maybe like an hour or two, just to make sure you are prepared. And then on the back end of that, in terms of actually executing the meal prep, knowing that one, like not every meal is going to be amazing, and that's okay. It will take a ton of practice. Right. To your final point, you're not locked into, you have to have grilled chicken, broccoli, and rice for every single meal. Like, tinker with stuff, see what you like. If you don't like it, don't quit. Just make adjustments over time.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Anything else that you think you would add to that? Or you feel like we covered meal prep pretty well?
I think maybe one more thing is that knowing that different seasons of life are might call for different strategies. So there are some times, and I know like the women in the group might experience this, like the time of the month, like you might be craving like different kind of foods, maybe more variety. So maybe during that time that week, my grocery trip might look a little different. But again, I'm not locked into any certain thing. So, and then on the other hand, like when I'm super busy, I think meals are going to be a lot more boring and a lot more simple. So I guess this just more goes off of what I said before about not being locked in, and then also not depriving yourself. So it's like, yes, simple and boring is going to happen a lot, but at the same time, like if you have cravings, or women with the time of the month, like it's okay to not have everything to be so rigid. I think, yeah, that's probably the only thing.
Yeah, that's actually a perfect segue into the last thing I wanted to ask you about, which is, okay, you have these cravings, you don't want to deprive yourself, you want to respect your body where you're at, but we want to be somewhat flexible to respect that, but not so flexible that we've then undone the other 6 days of the week. So when you have a client that you're trying to encourage to be more flexible on the nutritional front, what are some strategies you throw at them to kind of walk that fine line of splurging a little bit, but not so much that they backtrack?
Yeah, so I think the like one of the foundations of that is like avoiding the all or nothing mindset, and a lot of dieters fall into that trap of like it's all or nothing. I either on my diet or off my diet, and I think that's people think that it's to practice moderation. Like sometimes when I get together with my family, they'll order pizza. So something that I always try to do is like also have a salad with that. And maybe we'll get like a rotisserie chicken. So I'll have like grilled chicken on a salad, but then I'll have like 1 or 2 slices of pizza. So it's not just like, oh no, it's like you have to have that balance of like just balance out, like pizza's mostly carbs and fats, and get more veggies and lean protein in to balance it out. Like and then I think that goes back to maybe something I should have mentioned in the nutrition thing. It's like tracking the diet for a period of time to learn about macronutrients and like have more calorie awareness, learn about portion sizes. That can be eye-opening when sometimes if you don't have that information, you can think like certain foods are good or bad, or when that's not the case. It's like if you list one thing, or I need to make sure I'm eating enough protein, it just makes it a lot easier. So it's not like any foods are banned. It's more of like having more education to be able to incorporate them in a way that you can still make progress.
Yeah, sure. I like how that touches actually upon a lot of things that we go over in the group, but two things in particular. One, discipline allows freedom. So like you having the discipline to have like a small side salad with that chicken then gives you the freedom to have that pizza without feeling like you're going to overdo it or totally throwing the towel for the day. But then also another thing we go over a lot, which is facts over feelings. So you may feel like you blew your progress because you had, say 2 slices of pizza, but the fact of the matter is, which is very different, that may have only been, say, 380 calories because it was 2 small slices. And you're like, oh, I'm actually still in a deficit for the day. So instead of going by like what you feel like is going to happen, like let's look at the numbers. Don't avoid logging on days you don't eat well because it's actually better off to be in touch with those numbers. So like you said, you can make an educated decision, make swaps when necessary. So I'm really glad you mentioned both of those.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, and then like another thing is like we were still talking about um, flexibility. It's like practicing a certain level of flexibility, but as long as we're monitoring our progress and we're doing the basics consistently, like protein at every meal, veggies at most meals, strength training consistently, and then we keep tabs on progress, I think then we can see like, all right, I'm still like the progress pictures and measurements, or I'm still making progress, even though I've been pretty flexible. Like, so you just keep doing that until progress stalls and then reassess like, okay, maybe I need to scale back a little bit on my weekend drinking or going out to eat. Like it doesn't have to be perfect. It's not like it doesn't have to be like, okay, I have to keep it simple and focus on the big, like the big variables, then it just makes it a lot easier to adjust. When still there?
You were going out for a second. We lost
Uh,
you. Fell into that. I have
yeah,
you now. Do you have me on your end now?
yeah, I hear you now.
Can you repeat kind of, I'm sorry to make you do this, but like the last like 20 seconds or so of the strategies you were mentioning?
Um, yeah, so we were talking about, I just
I
want to
think
make
the
sure.
last thing that I had you for was talking about having those metrics to go off of the progress photos and the measurements, so you know that even though I'm not being perfect, I'll still make progress. And then you were starting to talk about making adjustments and like when to reel it back in based on those kind of metrics.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty much what I would say. It's like as long as you track your progress and you're making the progress you want to make, sometimes and especially for people who are either just starting out or haven't been paying that much close attention to nutrition in a while, I think they can a lot of times be more flexible than they think, as long as they're consistently good rather than occasionally perfect. Um, and just keeping track of that progress and then just scaling back when that progress stalls.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I like how you mentioned a lot of times it happens early on because I'm sure you've noticed this too. I feel like the barrier for a lot of people with good nutrition and working out consistently is they think they have to do more than they actually do. Whether it's like, I'm sure a lot of your clients work out 2 or 3 days a week, just try to get stronger, have a pretty flexible diet, and do really well. Whereas the average person's like, tomorrow's the day I want to start making progress. I'm going to work out every day for an hour. Like, I'm going to cut out all carbs and sugar, and like no wonder that doesn't last.
Right. Right. Totally. Yeah. I think exactly what you said. Like a lot of people start out and they think they have to do a lot more. Um,
Uh,
and they think intelligently. Did I freeze? You
yeah,
still hear me?
you
Okay.
I got you. Yeah, yeah. Hopefully we can hang on. We got one more thing I want to go over. So, um,
Um,
yeah,
yeah. So I think as long as you train consistently, train smart, be consistently good with diet, um, I think it's a lot easier and simpler than a lot of people make it out to be, especially when they start out, when they're like super motivated and want to go to the extremes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, if you have a client who's willing to be a little more flexible, and they buy into that, but they have a hard time not going with the all or nothing approach because their social environment is very much all or nothing. Like, say they're only around people who drink a lot and go out to eat all the time. Are there any strategies that you would use for kind of resisting peer pressure and like assessing, do I actually want what I'm being asked to participate in?
Yeah. Well, I think being aware too, and it's just like what we were talking about with the gym intimidation. It's like the longer you do it, like the longer you're making choices that support your goals, um, the longer you do it, the easier it becomes. Sometimes it can still doesn't mean it's always easy all the time, but it definitely gets easier and it feels a lot harder because I think it's already a change. So it initially feels hard for you personally, but then on top of that, people are pressuring you to maybe drink more, eat more, whatever. Um, and something that I've noticed and to keep in mind is that those people that are usually putting pressure on you are usually people who either have struggled with their weight the most, so they almost like, like they don't want it's like they don't want you to be successful because they couldn't be successful, or it's people who have literally never had to make dietary changes, so they really just don't get it at all. Like they just think that you're being like boring, or you just don't, yeah, like you just don't want to have fun. So I think it usually comes understanding that it comes from those two things, and I think the more you just either say no or kind of like distract yourself, I guess more actionable. Something that I told one of my clients who wanted to resist peer pressure with drinking is she was going to a wedding and she's like, I don't want to have too many calories. And so I told her, I was like, just drink, like get your first drink, and in between drinks, just get like a club soda with lime. So it looks like you're drinking. People aren't going to pressure you like, oh, drink, you got to drink. Where's your drink? So it appears to be an alcoholic drink, but it's really not. So what she did was just space out her drinks, and it looked like she was continually drinking the whole night, but she really wasn't. She was really just trying to be more conservative with her drinking that night. So that was that's one actionable thing. And a lot of times at parties, like I'll just fill up a solo cup with water and like walk around so people think it's alcohol, but it's really just a solo cup with water. But it just like kind of like lets people like back off and not feel like they have to get you a drink.
It's almost like playing the game a little bit, knowing it's inevitable and like this is something I can do to at least relieve a little pressure. And again, I'm glad you went back to the point of this taking, like saying no takes practice, especially if you're hanging around the same people who give you, like you said, the same hard time. Like, you're boring, this is lame, you can do that whenever. And like, it'll get easier. And eventually you can almost train these people. I hate to say it like that, but I condition them, I should say, to be, all right, Devon's not going to budge no matter what we do. Like, I'm not even going to bother giving her a hard time. And then the last point you made, which I thought was awesome, like the crabs in a bucket example, where if one crab tries to escape out of a bucket, the other ones all pull it back down, because it's like you succeeding makes me uncomfortable. So I think knowing that, like you said, the people who are giving you a hard time, it's not personal. It's not like they're like, I have something against Devon and her success. It's her success makes me feel uncomfortable with my lack of success.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And then another thing I wanted to add was as also that like, just because someone is taking care of their body or making progress, it doesn't mean that you have to ostracize yourself in social situations. So I think it's finding that balance. It takes trial and error, and then there's different seasons of life or different occasions. It's gonna look different. Like the eating and drinking is gonna look different in those situations. And I think you talked about this recently, was that not everything is a special occasion. So, and then knowing like if it's your friend's bachelor party and you really want to eat this one thing, like, yeah, you're going to eat it and not feel bad about it. But at the same time, it's like someone's birthday who maybe like they're celebrating their birthday, but you don't have to, you don't have to have cake or drink or eat excessively just because it's their birthday. So I think knowing when to splurge and when to be a little more conservative is something that, again, it's a skill that you learn along the way.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, looking at like what's a splurge worthy occasion, because I feel like most of us, our standards are way too low. I recently saw a post, I'm forgetting who put it out, but it was like, if it's the 15th office birthday party of the month, you probably don't need that cake. It's like, if it's not, I even recently went out to dinner with my sister for her birthday, and she had pizza. I got a salad, because me having pizza doesn't make her birthday better. And then when we got like cookies after, I just had a little bit of hers. Same thing. It's not my birthday. I don't need a big cookie for that. Like, it doesn't make her day better. It's almost like pausing and assessing: does this actually add to the experience, or like, am I just justifying poor decision?
Totally. Totally.
So to quickly recap the nutritional flexibility side, because I figured a lot of good stuff in there. Making sure that we have the metrics to know that even though we are being flexible and incorporating, say, pizza or cookies or alcohol, we are still making progress. That way, the times when we feel a little like food anxiety or feel a little nervous, we can be like, okay, this progress photo clearly shows I'm doing well. And I still had pizza most weekends. I'm not saying overdo it, obviously, but I still had pizza most weekends last month. And then when we're actually in those situations, in terms of overcoming peer pressure, so we can splurge when we want to. Biggest things being not taking it personally when people give you a hard time, because, like we said, it's about something that they're going through, nothing to do with us. And then the last point you made, which I really enjoyed, playing the game a little bit sometimes, maybe having alternating between like a seltzer water, sparkling water, I should say. When you're eating something, taking a really slow approach to eating. That way your plate isn't constantly being refilled by other people. Yeah, I feel like I covered the major points. Anything else you wanted to add on nutritional flexibility, or do you feel like you did okay there?
I think the main thing is just, I think I heard this phrase once, like, just get good at riding the roller coaster. And it's like I think shifting from, it has to be either on or off diet. It's like you use your skills and you kind of just adjust based off of life situations, and you get better at like navigating through those situations as you build your skills. Um, I think that's the most important thing with like navigating through basically just life and like social situations, vacation. It's not all or nothing. You just adjust based off of how you feel and what's going on, and like what kind of progress you want to make at that point in your life.
Yeah, I like that a lot. So going
Yeah.
into it knowing that it is going to be a roller coaster, I think a lot of people like wait at some point they think it's going to be smooth sailing. But you and I can attest to this, even as like fitness people, and like we see it with our clients. There's probably never been more than a 1 to 2 month, if that, stretch in your life where like your lifestyle demands were conducive to making progress. It's basically just like where we're at in the roller coaster, but it's very rarely a straight shot. It's always going to be at least a little something.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Fantastic. So, thank you so much for joining us today for this conversation. I thought we got a ton of good information from you. So I really appreciate that. The one thing that I do know is like 2/3 of the way through this, we did lose you a little bit. I think we got most of the audio, but what I'll do is kind of see what everyone says in terms of the video.
Okay.
Follow-up questions people have, because that's inevitable if we lost you for a second. And then I'll follow up with you, kind of let you know what thoughts and questions everyone had, and kind of take it from there.
Totally.
Awesome.
Sounds good.
Well, thank you so much, Devon. I really appreciate you being on with me.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. It was fun.
Awesome.